Hey students, today we're going to go over the answers to the Unit 1 study guide. So we'll start with number 1. It says the act of noticing and describing events or processes in a careful, orderly way is called, you should have used the word observation. Remember, observations are things that we make and can record information from in science when we are collecting data or information. Number 2 says the information gathered during an experiment is called data. And so, anytime you are recording information, whether it's measurements or observations, when you record them and put them potentially in a data table, it's called data. Number 3 says blank is a scientific explanation for a series of observations that can be tested in ways that support or reject it. So this is a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a prediction that can be tested. That's a very key feature to a hypothesis. Number 4 says a blank is a well-tested explanation that unifies a broad range of observations and hypotheses. The key here is well-tested. If something is well-tested, then we can call it a theory specifically, also because it unifies a broad range of observations. So theories are well tested and well established, whereas a hypothesis is a new idea potentially that we have to test before it can be verified. Number 5 says a blank is a signal to which an organism responds. So this is a stimulus, and a stimulus can come from outside of the organism's body, like if you open the door to go outside and you discover that it's very cold, that might stimulate you to go put a coat on. It could also come from inside of your body. If your stomach starts to growl, it's a signal or a stimulus that you might be hungry. And the last fill in the blank question is number 6, and it says blank is an organized way of gathering and analyzing evidence about the natural world. So remember, this is the scientific method. So it's a specific way that scientists approach collecting information and analyzing it. Next, we're going to go on to the matching section. And so we're going to match the letter from the definition with the term that it best fits. So number 7, the term is biology, and the definition of biology is B, the study of life. And we get that because bio means life, and the suffix logi means to study. Number 8 is bias. So bias is letter E, a point of view that is personal rather than scientific. And so anybody who comes to an idea with bias, and we all have bias, means that their personal experiences help them to interpret things, but might also shape their opinion. Number 9, the term is homeostasis. And homeostasis is when living things maintain a relatively stable internal environment. So that's the reason, for example, that your internal body temperature stays between 98 and 99 degrees all of the time, rather than changing with the temperature of the room that you're in. So that one is letter C. Number 10, the term is metabolism. And metabolism is the combination of chemical reactions through which an organism builds up or breaks down material. So metabolism is how you extract energy from the food you eat, and also how you use the molecules from the food you eat to build new molecules, like new muscle cells, or to repair broken skin or something like that. Next, we'll look at number 11. Number 11, the word is DNA, and the definition is letter D, a molecule containing the universal genetic code. So DNA is the way that all living things store genetic information, and it's the molecule that they pass on to their offspring. Number 12 is control group. So this is letter A. A control group is in an experiment, the group exposed to the same conditions as the experimental group, except for one independent variable. Number 13 is independent variable. So this is letter G. Letter G in an experiment is the variable that is manipulated. Another way to say that is the thing that the scientist changes. And then lastly, number 14 is the dependent variable. The dependent variable is letter H, and this is referred to as the responding variable or the thing that we measure. Now we can move on to some of the multiple choice questions. Number 15 says measurements made while observing a plant grow 3 centimeters over a 2-week period are called, and our keyword here is measurements. Oftentimes when you're measuring something, you are collecting data. So the correct answer is letter D. Number 16 says, based on your observations, you suggest that the presence of water could accelerate the growth of bread mold. This is considered a hypothesis because you are making a prediction about something that you think might happen. So the correct answer for this one is B. Number 17. Suppose that a scientist proposes a hypothesis about a newly discovered virus that affects humans. Other virus researchers would likely, so remember, researchers generally are not going to accept a statement as fact until they have tested it. So most researchers will design new experiments to test the proposed hypothesis. So that means that 17 is letter C. Number 18. Who reviews articles for peer-reviewed journals? Remember, peer-reviewed journals means that they're reviewed by other professionals who have the same type of job as the scientist, but are not their friends. So letter 18 is B. They will be reviewed by experts, but people who are reading this information or reading this paper for the first time. Number 19. How do scientific theories compare to hypotheses? Like you looked at on the front or the first page of the study guide, theories unify a broad range of observations and hypotheses. So the correct answer here is B, and it's because a theory is a large scientific idea that is well supported. Number 20. Which of the following is not a way that science influences society? So science can do a lot of things for us. It can provide answers to some of our problems if they can be solved with something practical or physical. It can advance technology, and it can help us understand how we impact the environment. But science does not give answers to ethical questions. So the answer for 20 is B. Number 21. Cells in multicellular organisms have many different sizes and shapes. These differences in cells are part of cell specialization. Cell specialization allows cells to perform different functions. So if you think about all of the cells in your body, your skin cells do a different job than your muscle cells, and they do a different job than your nerve cells. So all of those cells are specialized to do different functions. So the answer for this one is B. And then number 22 says, which big idea in biology is most concerned with DNA? If you remember, DNA is what carries all of our hereditary information from parents to their children, which means that the answer to this question is A, because DNA carries information and is passed on through heredity. Okay, so now we're going to start the second page of multiple choice questions. Number 23 says, what are the smallest objects that biologists study? So a lot of times people will say cells for this, but we actually also study the things that make up cells, and those are molecules. So the answer to 23 is C. Number 24. Science is best described as a way of knowing. So that's letter B. And this is because science is a systematic way of collecting information and then sharing it with others. Number 25. A well-tested explanation that explains a lot of observations is, again, a theory. Anytime something is well tested, it is on its way to becoming a theory or is a theory, because theories have lots of research that support them. So this is C. Number 26. What big idea in biology is represented by the fact that a frog and a toad are descended from common ancestors? Frogs and toads are both amphibians, and they share a lot of characteristics, and so this supports the idea of evolution, meaning they share a common ancestor, but they're slightly different from each other today because of the environment and selective pressures that they have lived through. Number 27. What characteristic of life is shown by a diagram showing which organisms are eaten by others? So if you think about what that question means, it's asking about what relationships are shown in something like a food web. And what that shows is a need for matter and energy. It shows how energy moves from one organism to another through an ecosystem. So this is letter D. Number 28. If a scientist announces the results of his experiment on TV without going through the peer review process, how would other scientists react? Remember, scientists like things to be peer reviewed, and they like to be able to verify the results of an experiment by being able to repeat it. And so until the scientists have had the results peer reviewed and then had somebody else be able to repeat the experiment, they will be skeptical. They might not disbelieve the scientist, but they would like to see the hypothesis that the scientist said they support be tested first. Number 29. When scientists design experiments, are they pretty sure what the results will be? And oftentimes that is yes. Scientists make an educated guess when they make a hypothesis, meaning that they know a lot about the subject, they just don't know the answer to that specific question. But because they have a lot of background information, their hypothesis is often accurate. Next, we'll look at some of these completion questions. The first one says, number 30, an experiment in which only one variable is changed is a controlled experiment. The scientist wants to control everything except the independent variable so that they can attribute any changes in their data to the independent variable. And then number 31 says, a biologist reads about a study in a peer-reviewed journal where the results do not agree with her research. The scientist must remain unbiased and think about how those results might affect her own work. When a scientist reads information that has been well tested from another scientist, they need to remember that the scientific method helped yield those results, and so they need to view them with an unbiased lens. Next, we're going to look at the characteristics of life. So the first characteristic of life is organizations. And so this just means that things that are alive are structured in an orderly way, and things that are alive must be made of cells. So anything that's alive will always be made of cells, without exception. Number 2 is reproduction. Reproduction is when a species or individuals are able to make more of their own kind. This is also called producing offspring. So remember, offspring are just descendants. In humans, we usually call them children. But reproduction can happen many ways. Some organisms just divide in half, and that is reproduction. Some organisms have sexual reproduction where it requires a DNA contribution from both parents. If there's only one parent needed, that's asexual reproduction. Number 3 is metabolism. Metabolism is all of the chemical reactions that go on in an organism. So chemical reactions might be breaking down molecules. We call that catabolism. Or it could be building molecules. We call that anabolism. And so we usually break down molecules when we eat them because we are extracting energy in the molecular pieces. And then we can use those pieces to build things like proteins. Number 4 is homeostasis. This is the ability of living things to keep their internal environment stable. And we do that in a variety of ways. Oftentimes we keep our internal environment stable by keeping the temperature the same, but we also keep what's called the pH the same, like in our blood. We keep the salt balance inside of our cells the same so that there's the right amount of dissolved solute. And number 5 is heredity. This is when an organism can pass on its inherited traits. It does this through a process where it passes the molecule DNA to its offspring. And the reason that's important is because DNA is instructions for how to make a new individual. Number 6 is responsiveness. Responsiveness is the ability of something that is alive to respond to its environment. And so you might respond to stimulus from internally that is like hunger, or you might respond to external stimulus because you hear a loud noise, so you turn to look. But the ability to respond to the environment is also required in order for something to be alive. Number 7 is growth and development. So this is the ability of an organism to add material or cycle material through its body throughout its lifetime or its lifespan. And so some organisms, like multicellular organisms like humans, actually change size, right? When you were born, you were probably about 20 inches long, and now you're probably over 5 feet tall. So you added material. If you were a single-celled organism, you might not get very much larger, but you would definitely change over time and change out the molecules that make up your body. So growth and development is different depending on the complexity of the species. And then number 8 is evolution. Evolution occurs when gradual change in a species occurs over time, and this allows a species to adapt to its environment to become more successful at living in the place that it lives. Species that have a rapidly changing environment but do not evolve sometimes go extinct. All right, so you've made it to the last page of the study guide. We're going to go through identifying some variables from this experiment. So let's review the experiment first. It says that a scientist conducted an experiment to determine the effect of the environment on the fur color of a Himalayan rabbit. The Himalayan rabbit typically has a white coat except for its colder nose, feet, tails, and ears, which are black. The scientist shaved an area of hair on the back of each rabbit, then placed an ice pack over the shaved area on one rabbit. So here you can see the rabbits were shaved, but this rabbit got an ice pack, and this rabbit has no ice pack. So 33 says, in which rabbit is the control? So remember, the control rabbit is the one that does not experience the independent variable. So in this instance, the control rabbit is rabbit B. Number 34 says, what is the independent variable in this experiment? So the thing that makes rabbit A different from rabbit B is the application of ice or the change in temperature on the shaved patch of the rabbit's back. Number 35 says, what is the dependent variable in this experiment? So the dependent variable, what you're going to measure, is the color of the fur that comes in on the shaved patch on the rabbit's back. We would expect the fur to grow in dark if that area is cold, if cold is what influences hair color, and it would grow in light if temperature does not impact hair color. And number 36 says, based on your observations, conclude what effect the temperature has on Himalayan rabbits. And what we discover is that rabbit A has a black patch on his back where the ice pack was. So we learned that cold temperatures make the rabbit's fur grow in black instead of warmer areas where it's light. And then the last set of questions to answer are some matching questions. So number 37, we're looking for the definition of the word observation, and you should see that this is letter C. So letter C says it's usually the first step of the scientific method. Usually the scientist observes something and that causes them to form a question. Number 38, the term we're looking for is theory, and a theory is letter A. It may be revised or changed if new evidence is gathered. If no new evidence is presented, a theory still stands as the best explanation. Number 39, we're looking for the definition of the word experiment. And so we want to answer this with letter D, which is the process of testing a hypothesis. So the reason we do experiments is to test our hypothesis about a specific question. And then number 40 is hypothesis. A hypothesis is B, a testable possible explanation, right? And so that is what a hypothesis is, something we can test by doing an experiment.